Good morning and welcome to the Bobby Moore Stand. My name is Chris. It's Thursday morning. I hope that you're all doing well. I would love to say that I am, but that would be a bit of a fabrication and a lie because I'm a West Ham fan. And now is not a great time to be a West Ham United supporter. And I think that was further amplified by a club statement that was released yesterday evening. And this is with regards to a recent meeting that they had with the FAB, the Fans Advisory Board, that took place on the 11th of September. Now, today I'm going to share with you that statement and I'm going to break this down into a little bit of detail and also provide my feedback and thoughts around this, which is going to be honest, frank, and I guess to some extent a little bit brutal, but I don't know any other way but to be honest about this stuff. So I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. Now, before I do come on to that, if you do watch the Bobby Moore Stand on a regular basis, please do like the video. It really is much appreciated. And equally, if you are new to this channel, please do subscribe and like the video. Like I say, we really genuinely do appreciate it. But look, let's move on because yesterday evening, West Ham released quite a lengthy statement. I read it a few times and in truth, it angered me quite a lot because ultimately it papers over the cracks, or at least they've tried to paper over the cracks and appease the fans, which for me, it really doesn't do. It doesn't do that in the slightest. And they've ultimately ignored key things and significant things that we are really unhappy about with West Ham at this moment in time. So I'm going to go straight through this, right? So the first paragraph reads, and I'm going to read this through. I'm going to read this to you, right? So it is just 2 years since we lifted the club's first major European trophy in 43 years, the UEFA Europa Conference League triumph. Came in the middle of 3 successive campaigns in European competition. The first time that we ever achieved that feat. Following that period, significant investment was made into the football operation, both in signing new first-team players and the club's overall scouting network and player recruitment department. Now, this first statement really winds me up because it seems as though the club will always use the Europa Conference League as a way of papering over all of the cracks, significant cracks that we have right now at this club. They always come out with that. They always do. They then talk about, and by the way, don't get me wrong, that was a fantastic achievement for West Ham. I mean, it was brilliant, and it was one of the best nights of my life as a West Ham fan because it was ultimately the first trophy I ever saw us lift in my lifetime. So it was absolutely a very memorable moment of being a West Ham fan. But then they talk about this 3 successive campaigns in Europe. Now, in my opinion, and I'm sure this is shared by many of you as well, we bottled 2 of those campaigns quite badly. And when I say we bottled it, the board bottled it, the managers bottled it, because we had the opportunity to build upon momentum that we were gathering. We were doing really well. Now, you only need to circle back to the 21-22 season, the first season that we were in the Europa League. If you go back to November of 2021, we were 3rd in the league after beating Liverpool. We were doing well domestically. We were doing well in Europe. We were on the up. We were absolutely on the up. But then what happened was we got to the January transfer window, or more to the point, we got into December and we started to experience some injuries, and pretty significant ones of that as well, right? So first of all, that season, you may recall Angelo Ogbonna had a massive injury. He had an ACL injury, kept him out for for the rest of the season. So he was out from, I think, around about mid-November, right down till probably around about mid-May. So he was out for the entire campaign after that. Aaron Creswell also experienced an injury in December. He was out for just under a month. We had Kurt Zouma out for about a month and a half, which took him out of pretty much all of December and half of January. We had Ben Johnson out, and also we had Jared Bowen out, who was out for around about a month between March and April. Now, we're not talking about fringe players here. We're talking about key first-team players at that particular time, players that we couldn't really afford to lose in our first team. Now, if you go back to that January transfer window, we could have done so much more. Like I said, we could have built on that momentum. We could have and we should have signed players in that January window, but the board didn't do that. Now, it seems to me that the owners of West Ham are only willing to take the club so far. It's almost like they get a nosebleed when we reach a particular height. We had the opportunity that season, probably the best opportunity that we'll ever have, or at least we will have for a very long time, of actually making it into the Champions League. Now, that might seem a bit far-fetched, but it's not. It's a fact. We were 3rd. We were 3rd in November. We were doing well in Europe. And you would think a sensible owner would look at the squad that we had, realize it was a pretty small squad, and think, you know what, let's add a few more players into this and really have a go at trying to win that competition. But they didn't do that, did they? No, they didn't. We ultimately didn't win the competition that season. And I think we could have. Bearing in mind the teams that we could have ended up playing. We could have ended up having Rangers in the final. We could have been in the Champions League the next season. So you talk about successful campaigns. Look, we did well to get as far as we did in that campaign. And in my opinion, we probably did better than we should have when you bear in mind the injuries that we sustained in that season in particular. And then you kind of fast forward a little bit to the 23-24 season. Now, again, we were in Europa League once again. What did we do in the January transfer window? Now, bearing in mind, we all know that our squad was aging. It was depleted. We always were getting injuries. And guess how many players we signed in that window? We signed the grand total of 0. None. No players at all. We don't need to, do we? We don't need to sign players. We can still try and win that trophy with the squad that we had. Well, that went well, didn't it? And I think, if you go back to that particular season when we played Bayer Leverkusen, we all knew that we needed a striker. Mikel Antonio was out injured for a spell. He came back for that game. He actually did pretty well that game, but bearing in mind, the geezer was unfit. The geezer couldn't play a full 90 minutes. We had no one else that we could depend on playing up front. Jared Bowen wasn't the answer, but again, the ball did not stick their hands in their pockets. So they are absolutely culpable of not achieving an even higher level of success that we could have and should have achieved, in my opinion, particularly for the 21-22 season. That one I can't forgive. I really, really can't. Anyway, moving on to this statement, right? So first, we accept the results and performances on the pitch over the past 2 seasons have not met the standards that we set ourselves. Nobody at the club is satisfied with that, and the board of directors have spent a great deal of time looking at the decisions that have been made across the football operation in order to inform an improved strategy going forward. Well, that's a breath of fresh air, isn't it? I mean, I'm really delighted to hear that, because I can tell you now why results haven't been going our way. Because we've had cheap out-of-work managers that we've been hiring on a consistent basis every single time. When have we ever gone out and spent money on a manager that can come in and build West Ham, a manager that is on the up? We haven't done that in donkey's years. Well, I can't even remember the last time that we did that. I genuinely can't. Like I say, cheap out-of-work managers that don't have a clue. And on top of that, of course, poor recruitment. Extremely poor recruitment. Really, really bad. Our focus is now firmly on the future and building a team that we can once again compete consistently in domestic competitions and in Europe. I mean, really, are we really gunning for Europe this season? We'd be lucky if we stay up as it stands right now. We have a strong platform which to continue that quest, in that we are entering our 14th consecutive season in the Premier League, our longest unbroken top flight run in the modern era. So, first off, do we have a strong platform to build on? Because in my opinion, I don't think we do. We've got a manager that, as I've said already, appears to be pretty clueless, tactically inept as a manager. Doesn't know how to pick his strongest team, let alone his strongest formation. He's only just suddenly realised that playing 4 at the back will probably work, but he's still not playing his strongest players, particularly in the midfield area, like we all know. Arguably, we have one of the slowest midfields in the Premier League right now, but yet we still continue to play those 2 players. He can't address key problematic areas. So I don't see how we've got this amazing platform that we're going to build on, because ultimately we've got a manager that seems to be completely clueless. As for the 14th consecutive season in the Premier League, now, are we really going to be celebrating this? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that we play in the Premier League and we're playing in, Europe's top tier of football. But let's get this right. We moved to the London Stadium. We left Upton Park. We had Upton Park knocked down and turned to a dirty block of flats to move to this giant fishbowl, and we were promised a world-class team in a world-class stadium. But here are the board telling us that we're celebrating our 14th consecutive season, that we should be really proud of that. I'm sure we were promised a lot more than that. I really am sure. So are we just happy just to stay in the Premier League? Well, I'll let you think about that. I know what I think about that already. Steps have already been taken to implement a new strategy and approach. That's great, isn't it? Particularly in the area of player recruitment. Really? Is that true, really? We have appointed Graham Potter as our new head coach. Well, that's really working out well, isn't it? His role is to build and develop a first-team squad in line with the club's identity and objectives, with a continued focus on integrating young players from our academy. What's the identity? What's the identity, guys? Because I don't know. What I'm seeing right now is a team that can't defend to save its life. I'm seeing a team that has the slowest midfield in the Premier League, and I'm seeing a team that has probably the oldest forward line in the Premier League as well. As for integrating young players into the team, well, who? Who exactly are we integrating? Are we talking about Freddie Potts, who had a really good pre-season, but yet still has not had a look in what is arguably the weakest part, one of the weakest parts of our team right now in midfield? Hasn't had a sniff, hasn't had a look in whatsoever. Are we talking about Ollie Scholes? Well, okay, we introduced him for a spell last season. He hasn't come anywhere close to the first team this year. I know he had a little niggle, but he doesn't like he's going to step into the team. Yes, we've got Malik Diouf in there, so of course I play him over Ollie Scholes, but he's not a player that we can talk about, a youngster that is coming through and playing regularly or anything like that. Callum Marshall, again, another player that did pretty well in pre-season, has not had a look in. But what are we going to do? We're going to put Lucas Paqueta up front against Tottenham Hotspurs, a central attacking midfielder playing in a false nine position, which doesn't work, which proved on Saturday when we played Spurs. We need a striker up there. I think he'd done an okay job, but that's not his position. But we've got young Callum Marshall there. He's a striker. We had Fulkrug. All right, he might have not been completely fit, but he was on the bench. We had Callum Marshall. He was also, Callum Wilson. He was also on the bench as well. I don't know who these young players are that are being integrated and coming through to the first team. I don't see them. What about Preston Fearon? You know, he looks exceptional. Well, he looked exceptional in pre-season. For the limited amount of time that I did see him play, looked really good. He actually played really well against Wickham the other night as well. You know, scored a couple of goals. He looks like a real young, real prospect. He does. He doesn't like he's getting anywhere close to the first team. And if these players can't get into the team now, then what hope have they got in the future? Look how bad our team is right now. It's awful. How can none of these youngsters get into our team? How can they not even come off the bench and get some minutes? It's beyond belief, in my opinion. Anyway, moving on. Sporting director Mark Noble played a key role in protecting and enhancing that pathway, ensuring that the club's brightest young prospects are all secured on long-term contracts, and providing his huge experience in understanding of the club's identity to help nurture and progress any of the players arriving to establish themselves in the first team. Whilst head of recruitment, Carl McCauley, was brought in to oversee player recruitment transfers. Now, let's park that bit on Carl McCauley for a second. Let's talk about Mark Noble. Now, I'll never knock Mark Noble. You know, he's a fantastic ambassador to the club, and I'm sure I've got no doubts in my mind whatsoever that he's schooling these young kids to really understand what it's like to play for West Ham, understanding the identity of the club. I've got no doubts in my mind about that. But let's talk about Carl McCauley for a second here. So Carl McCauley is overseeing transfers, overseeing recruitment and transfers. So what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that he's overseeing David Sullivan and Will Salthouse, bringing in the likes of Callum Wilson? Because for me, I don't really get what this overseeing thing is. You know, well, does that mean, as I say, overseeing the signing of a 33-year-old injury-prone striker to back up our already injury-prone 32-year-old German striker? I don't know. Sullivan's too involved in recruitment, as we all know. So I think Carl McCauley has his hands tied. We all know that. Moving on. We've also listened to supporters' individual and collective views around their perception of our London Stadium home and the club's facilities and infrastructure. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? They're listening to supporters' individual and collective views around the perception of the London Stadium. Feedback about improving the matchday atmosphere at the stadium has been recognised as recently as the FAB meeting in August, and the club is already working with supporters to address their feedback. Work has been well underway with the stadium operators, supporters groups dedicated to enhancing atmosphere, and fan-led initiatives to improve the matchday feel, including the introduction of fan-led zones, fan-led displays, and tifos. Well, in my opinion, that's kind of addressing pretty much sod all, because matchday atmosphere is one thing. And by the way, you know, the Ironworks Alliance are doing a fantastic job in terms of trying to generate an atmosphere in the lower tiers of the Bobby Moore. I think they're doing fantastic. They really are. But when you're talking about fan-led displays and tifos, do they really think a few flags and a bloody tifo is going to increase and enhance our matchday experience? Because I've got to tell you right now, that's not enhancing my matchday experience whatsoever. What is this, a game of FIFA? You know, having a tifo. I honestly, I don't understand it. I really don't. What I want to see is enhancing our match day experience by actually focusing more on the actual stadium, which is something that they're not really talking about. In fact, they've completely ignored in this statement. They really, really have. They've not spoken about, the promise of the world-class stadium and the world-class team. They've not addressed any of that stuff whatsoever. Oh, also Champions League football as well that we were promised. Let's not forget that. Not that I believed it, by the way. But we're also talking about problems that we all know. The stadium. I mean, the gaps in the stadium, the distance from the actual pitch, the views in certain sections of that stadium are pathetic. I mean, you would need genuinely binoculars. I don't know how people in the upper tiers, right at the back in the gods, can really enjoy a proper match day experience. What we used to have at the London, in this London stadium, how can they enjoy that? Honestly, I really, really don't. I don't understand it at all. You're also talking about a stadium that has gaps of probably somewhere in the region of between 30, 40, maybe even more meters in the lower tiers. If you look at the Bobby Moore stand lower, we've got a beer garden there that's probably around about 40 meters long. Now, you tell me any stadium, I can't think of a single stadium in the Premier League that has a beer garden on open display in a stadium that you can see from the pitch. It's embarrassing. I mean, it's an utter embarrassment. This is not what we were promised. But the club don't address this in this statement at all. What they're talking about is atmosphere and tifos. That's really what they're talking about here. And fan zones. They're not talking about that disgusting stadium that we go to pretty much every other week. It's not fit for purpose. It's not fit for purpose. And also, when you talk about atmosphere as well, by the way, what about the acoustics in that stadium? I'm pretty sure Karen Brady promised us that the enclosure within the stadium would really be able to enhance the atmosphere, and it doesn't do that at all. It really does not do that. So again, that was another lie. Thank you for that, Brady. Honestly, it just goes on and on and on. Where do we go next? Okay, so look, we continue to do everything we can, working with supporters to improve the matchday experience on behalf of the 62,500 supporters we welcome to every home fixture. We are proud to have the second highest average attendance in the Premier League and 50,000 loyal season ticket holders, also the second highest number in the Premier League. Well, that's great because that's lining their pockets clearly in terms of the amount of people that are turning up for these games week in, week out and putting through the pain that we are week in, week out. But it fails to recognise the tens of thousands of fans that have turned their back on the London Stadium because they can't stand watching this turgid crap anymore, which I totally understand and respect, by the way. I totally get it because it's more like a chore turning up and watching this right now. I mean, it really is. It's like a chore. I think that's the best word that I could use. So I don't blame anyone for walking away from this, but they don't mention any of this stuff, right? We've also invested tens of millions of pounds in our training bases for the men's, women's, and academy squads. This includes millions of pounds spent this summer on continually improving our training facilities at Rush Green. Really? Including new pitches, medical facilities, gym and recovery areas, plus a brand new facility for our under-21 academy development squad. Well, to me, it's quite a vague statement because doesn't Rush Green, and I'm pretty sure about this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we still use porter cabins. Are there any other teams in the Premier League that have porter cabins in their training facilities? No, there aren't. I can't think of a single one. I can't. Let's face it, Rush Green is widely considered as one of the worst training facilities in the Premier League right now. It is. It's not a Premier League training ground. It's one of the worst training facilities in the Premier League. And look, I also believe that we were granted planning permission to also retain buildings for an additional 2 years. Now that's granted planning permission, I think it was, for 2 additional years. Now that's hardly a state-of-the-art facility, is it? I mean, it isn't. It really isn't. Moving on, this follows a £4 million investment to completely renovate Chadwell Heath for the benefit of our academy and women's teams, and another £4 million investment into our brand new community hub in Beckton. I'm not going to argue with that because I think that's money well spent in terms of developing, obviously, the training grounds for the youngsters, and also, trying to, I guess, hopefully, unearth a few gems in this brand new community hub at Beckton as well, because, we want to get local lads that are coming, joining West Ham. And so hopefully that can help generate some of that as well. So that's a decent thing, right? That's about it. That really is about it. We believe that the biggest strength of the men's first team training facility. Now, this bit actually got me. I mean, it really did. We believe that the biggest strength of the men's first team training facility at Rush Green is the unique, intimate atmosphere enhanced by the people within it. Something that certainly didn't hinder the club when winning a European trophy just 2 years ago. Well, they had to mention that again, didn't they? Of course they did. And something that, again, is thriving under Graham Potter. Well, thriving under Graham Potter, look, I'll be honest with you, I couldn't care less. If all the players are happy and having a great time on the training field, oh, that's great. But all I really care about is what they're actually doing on the pitch. When they're playing in the Premier League, when they're playing in the Europa League, when they're playing in the Carabao Cup. That's what I care about. And they're playing crap. Look at the results. Look at the amount of goals we conceded. But apparently the atmosphere, the intimate atmosphere is amazing, enhanced by the people within it. So this is about the people. This is about the people. This is not about the facilities. They're talking about the people here. So presumably we could have a Wendy house and have those people in it, and we'd still create the same intimate atmosphere. It's a load of nonsense. It really, really is. Moving on, our head coach has made it clear his philosophy of developing an environment of trust and togetherness built on the values that underpin the identity of our football club, including the importance of creating a pathway for first-team players, for our young academy players. Well, yeah, look, we've already addressed that. Potts, Marshall, Earthy, Skulls, Theron, etc. They don't feature. We've invited supporter representatives on the FAB to visit Rush Green in person to see the latest developments for themselves. Well, I'll be interested to see what the feedback is from the FAB on that when they do actually have the pleasure of visiting the lovely porter cabins over at Rush Green. In terms of our current financial outlook, the club is stable and sustainable. Like all Premier League clubs, we must balance the desire to compete at the highest level with the responsibility to run the club sensibly and prudently. We are operating within the current PSR rules governed by the Premier League, which limit us to a maximum losses over a rolling 3-year period of 105 million, 35 million per year. And we try to maintain the balance by remaining both compliant and competitive as we have been throughout the last 13 years in the Premier League. Well, okay, that's great, but there's no mention whatsoever in this entire statement about the investment that is actually coming from the actual owners of West Ham. And guess what? The reason for that is because there is no investment coming from the actual owners of West Ham. None at all. Absolutely none. This means being cautious at times, but it does not point to a lack of ambition. Over £450 million has been spent on new player signings in the last 3 years, including an average net spend of £100 million per season. In that period, we have always managed to stay within the PSR rules. But look at how that money's been spent. Look at how that money's been spent. They're proud of the fact that they spent this money, but they've wasted it time and time again. I mean, we're paying overly inflated prices on average players. We're paying transfer fees for players probably at the tail end of a transfer window when clubs know they can up their price because they know we're desperate for players. We continuously delay and faff around the transfer markets and end up paying stupid money for basically bang average players. Look at James Ward-Prowse. Look at Max Kilman. Was Max Kilman worth £40 million? Was James Ward-Prowse worth £30 million or whatever it is we paid for him? No, he wasn't. We also continue to make positive progress and enjoy successful growth off the field across all other areas of the organisation. The club has enjoyed sustained high commercial growth that continues us to allow us to compete. Allows us to complete. I think they meant to put down compete, but that's a typo there. Every penny generated is reinvested back into the football club. Well, again, that's a pretty vague and broad statement to some extent, because I'd like to know exactly how much of this money that we're generating through this high commercial growth that is actually going back in, to the football club, and how it's building, how it's reinvested, how it's been building this football club. Because I don't know. You know, the statement goes on and on and on. It talks about the recent meeting with the FAB on the 11th of September, and it also talks about subsequent ones coming in the future. And there's also a load of faff here about we're proud of our history and our loyal fan base. And then it goes on to thank and appreciate the fans, you know, in the UK and all over the world for their continued backing of West Ham United and the role that we all play in helping us to become one of the biggest and best supported football clubs in the world. It's just a shame that we're not run by owners that can kind of appreciate that we really are one of the best supported clubs in the world. It's a load of nonsense. A load of nonsense coming from them once again. And you know what? All this statement does for me, and I'm sure for hopefully a lot of you as well, is to further enhance the need to protest and kick this board out of West Ham. It's been 15 years since they came into this club. 15 years too long, in my opinion. And I've got to the point, I'm at the end of my tether now. I can't bear it anymore with these guys in charge. I really, really can't. You know, when I first became a West Ham supporter, I was 6 years old. It's a family thing, as it is probably for most of you as well, no doubt. You know, it's inherited through generations. And my first game was against Coventry City in the 86 season. It was the first game of the season that particular year. I think it was the 86-87 season. I was like 6 years old. And Tony Gale scored, I think it was the winning goal right at the end of the game as the 89th minute. It wasn't the greatest game in the world. And I don't remember it that well. But what I do remember was my first experience of going to Upton Park. And this is what I want to talk about here, because this is what we left behind. This is what we've had to sacrifice for this pile of shit, this shit show that we have right now. Now, when I was 6 years old, I'll never forget it. And I'm sure everyone who's watching this now can probably remember some of those moments when you were a youngster or the first time you ever went to Upton Park. You know, whether it was with your dad, your granddad, with your family. Those are really, really special moments. My grandparents used to live in East Ham. You know, I was born and bred in East London. I was born in Barking. My grandparents lived in East Ham. And my first ever game, I would go to the house in Clements Road and I would walk through East Ham High Street, go through the market, pick up some sweets, cut into Barking Road, walk down Barking Road, probably hover in and around the bowling. But actually prior to that, I would have got some pie mash, go to the bowling. I was too young to drink, obviously, but I was in and around it. But what I will always remember was the atmosphere. I remember the walk. I remember the feeling of walking to that ground. You know, it was something that was so unique and special. I mean, so unique and special. It was such a feeling of excitement, of anticipation. You know, the smells that were emanating from the ground, the noise that was emanating from the ground as well. You know, all of the chit chat that you'd hear the fans talking, walking down the streets. It was something truly unique and special. The whole area was unique and special. It was our home. It was our spiritual home, as I've said so many times. And we gave all of that up. Not willingly. No one really wanted us to move to the London Stadium. You know, we've spoken about this on live shows before. If you look on average, how much better we are as a football team in terms of league placings, on average, we're one place above what we were when we were basically playing at Upton Park. What does that tell you? Does this tell you that this was a successful move to the London Stadium? No. When you look at the European competitions, was that planned? Was that by design, or was that by luck? I'll let you think about that, but I know what my opinion is on that. I don't think they ever recruited David Moyes with the idea that he would go out there and compete in European competition. This was not by design. I miss Upton Park, as I'm sure all of you do. I know that we can't ever get that back, but my opinion is we absolutely can get our club back. We can get our club back, and I think the first route to getting our club back is by making sure that we can get rid of those owners. That is the most important thing. Now, we all know that there are protests that are going to be taking place very, very soon as the Crystal Palace game this weekend, something that, you know, Hammers United are heavily involved in. So, you know, massive credit to the guys over there. Something that I'm going to get involved in. And, you know, something that I did read on a statement from them as well was, and I want to share this with you, because if you are interested in attending these protests or you are thinking about it, please do this. And this kind of hits home a little bit right now. This is going to be at Marshgate Lane this coming Saturday at 12:45. And what Hammers United has said is, and this really does kind of, this hits hard for me. Remembering those who came before us and those we travelled with to watch West Ham that are no longer with us. What would they say if we did nothing? Well, I'll let you think about that. I know what I think about that, but doing nothing achieves nothing. But doing something could achieve something. I think the owners are wobbling right now. And I think now is the time that we collectively unite as a fan base and make sure that we can get rid of the owners of West Ham Football Club. We need to get them out, and we need to come back to what we need to regain some of what we were as a football club. Think about all those memories that you have as supporters. Think about all of those special times that you had with, sadly, members of your family that have probably passed. Think about all of those memories and think about what we gave up. Think about what we stand for as supporters and why West Ham is so important to us. And on that note, I'm going to leave it there. But look, if you have watched the video to the end, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Please do back the protest. It's so important. It really, really is. And I think more and more and more people are jumping on this, and rightly so. We need to regain what is ours. It's not theirs. This is ours. So look, thank you for watching once again. If you do like the content, please do like and subscribe. And no doubt we will see you very, very soon. Come on, you irons.